Jared Hudson's with us, and he actually here. Look at this screen. This is the results from your election. 7,000-ish votes, right, from Mark Petway, who was the incumbent Democrat.
Yep, about 7,000, give or take. Looks like it was more on the give side. So yeah, I was close. I said 197,000 total, 196,852, which was odd. That was 40,000 less than it was the previous,
really
2018 sheriff's election. Yeah.
Let me just try something real quick. Make sure my picture-in-picture does work. Okay.
48,
On the bottom.
Less? Wow.
About 40,000 less, yeah, because I think it was 200 and I can't remember 237 or 227,000 votes that they had in the 2018 election. He could probably look it up between.
It's probably about. I mean, that's close to 30-35% if you're looking at 100,000, 94,000 the other two.
It was crazy how much lower. I never would have guessed would have been lower than 200,000 because you've got 495,000 voter age people in Jefferson County. So.
Wow.
So you had less than what would that be? Is that 42% turnout, give or take?
Yeah.
197,000 out of 490.
Yeah, because you had about 200,000. You're saying about 40,000. So yeah, it's a little bit less than 40%. So.
And remind me, being new to Alabama, Jefferson County is Birmingham.
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 So it's still the largest county in Alabama. Although I think up here where y'all are at, Madison County area is
the
Huntsville area. Yeah, Huntsville area is growing, though. I'm talking about even population. They're not larger yet, but they're getting close because I think Jefferson County still has, I think they have 700,000, give or take. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And the way they do those counts, actually, so a lot of people will tell you, like, for example, they'll say Huntsville's the biggest city now in quote-unquote Alabama. If you actually take into the real way that we do it, for example, in commercial real estate, is we look at the greater population, so the TVA. The Tennessee Valley Authority is what Huntsville. It's the amount of people that come in and out of Huntsville a day. It's about 1.5 million. But Birmingham, you still have close to about 2 million people that live in the totality of Birmingham. Yeah. So it's still vastly bigger than Huntsville. It's just when you compare, which you probably don't live in Birmingham City.
No, I don't. Yeah, but we live in that outside. But if you look at the Birmingham metro area, which spans a couple counties even, right, and a couple municipalities, you're probably, and then you have people going in and out for work.
Coleman can
Coleman, a lot of people from Coleman,
it.
Blount County come over and work. You do have a couple of million folks that trek through Birmingham Day, and it is substantially larger than up here. But it's growing.
Oh no, here
tremendously.
It is growing,
it's blown me away to see the growth. So
we're the 16th fastest growing city right now.
In the nation.
In the nation.
Dang on, man.
Yep.
Jared, former Navy SEAL. We'll probably talk about that later. But you were SEAL Team 3, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
And then were medically retired.
Mm-hmm.
You contracted type 1 diabetes.
So type 1 diabetes, they linked it to the anthrax vaccine, and I went through a process. I spent about a year here while I was still kind of in the Navy, or they're just kind of going through my medical stuff until they finally got my stuff. So they worked out a good deal with me that's helped take care of me and my family and kind of my diabetes, but they had to add a bunch of stuff. So I could have been in the regular Navy and had type 1 diabetes, but you can't be a SOCOM JSOC operator. So
Non-deployable.
I would have been a non-deployable SEAL, or I could have deployed in the regular Navy. They're like, hey, you have a degree, you can go be an officer and go to do maybe intel or something. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be in the SEAL teams. So they gave me a few options that just weren't worthwhile because I was going to be a non-deployable SEAL. And so here I sit.
So does that affect you, though, the having diabetes on doing what you do now, doing ops at all? Or
yeah, I mean, not as much. I mean, blood sugar, up and down, crashes, and then gets high. I mean, it's just normal, type 1 diabetes, which is not, not fun, but it definitely impacts anything. If I go overseas or something, it makes it even more difficult. I understand and I see why I could not be a SEAL as a type 1 diabetic. I see why they wouldn't let you do it. So for me, it was you're in the SEAL teams for basically 6 years, and then my last or 6.5, I guess, my last year and a half of time, before 2014 when I got my final all the stuff, I'm going through this medical process, and so that was kind of the catalyst that got me out of this type of work. I tried doing some overseas contracts, but it did impact, and so I got into local law enforcement, finished my MBA, started a business, and ran the training business now full time, and then stayed sworn as law enforcement here in the state of Alabama.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by TPG. TPG is the founder of the quality assurance industry and most known for the tagline, "This call may be monitored for quality assurance," which they brought to the call center market more than 26 years ago. They dominate the market with an internationally recognized client base of Fortune 500 brands. They have created the quality standards used by their clients and have defined 307 attributes that they measure to define a great conversation, including complex concepts such as skills associated with empathizing and rapport building with customers. For more information on TPG, visit them at tpginc.com. And Covenant Rescue Group is the nonprofit that you and your wife started.
So, yes, sir.
And so interestingly, Eric is in the studio. Eric meets you last week at the Moms for Liberty event where Kirk Cameron and Riley Gaines came.
That's right, yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what your involvement was, kind of why you were, I think you were invited or asked to attend as a guest.
Somebody just asked me, I'm trying to remember who it was that emailed me. It was, I can't even remember who first did say that again.
Was it Emily that did?
Well, Emily was also tied into it, but somebody else reached out, and I can't remember who it was, but it doesn't matter. Go look at my email. I think Walls was his last name. Either way, somebody reached out and said, "I saw you on Bannon's show." Bannon's daughter texted me one day, said, "Hey, we'd like to interview you from a
Steve Bannon."
Steve Bannon,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So on the War Room show, like 15 minutes, they just asked, about child exploitation, child trafficking, Sound of Freedom, all that stuff, and because that movie's kind of generated, and so he saw that, reached out and said, "Can you come to this?" And I said, "I don't think I'm going to be in town." And then actually, what we were going to do got canceled, and so I sent him a message back and said, "Hey, I'll be around." I said, "My wife and I will come up," and so that was before any of this craziness spun up about the Moms for Liberty thing with the protest and all the stuff. It's canceled. It's not canceled, and so I talked with him on Friday. I said, "Hey, look, I'm hearing in the news this thing canceled." He's like, "No, it's not canceled." Or maybe she said, maybe it was Emily who sent me a text, said, "It's not canceled." And so we talked with her on the phone and said, "All right, well, I'll see y'all tomorrow." And that's pretty much it.
What's funny is I actually, to be honest, the only reason I was there is I couldn't sleep one night. Actually, Chloe, so my daughter wakes up at like 2. I don't know if you ever have it where they wake up like an hour or so in a row, and you're just like, I'm up. So I was up, whatever. So around 2, I was just up for that day, whatever. And I kind of look on the Daily Wire app that I have, and it says something about Huntsville City cancels. I was like, Huntsville? I was like, why are we in the national news? So I saw Emily. I sent her an email that night. This must have been Thursday. And that's when I help her, hope get some other facilities and talk to people. So I really had nothing to do with setting up that event or anything. I just happened to help on the back end. Just
I think I learned.
Help out.
I've kind of gathered that from all the folks there. I think what I learned I think Kirk Cameron had actually set it up, and that was his request, and it was his Brave Books tour or something like that. So it was actually a Kirk Cameron thing that he had set up where he just went to these libraries. I think Moms for Liberty wanted to support it, and they got involved, on the support side of it. So I think that's really what it was, right?
So what he did is, the Moms for Liberty had set up from Emily had told me, she's the one that's in charge of Moms for Liberty, yesterday, that they had set up this event essentially just to have books, in school and just promote, having actually Christian values in the public library, but really just having, time that kids can come back and we could socialize and people get to know each other, our community again. Kirk Cameron randomly emails Emily and says, "Hey," for his team he's very professional. You could tell he's been in Hollywood his whole life, but he emails Emily and then says, "Hey, great news! We've chosen you for his Brave Books tour." And so
that's
it was
pretty
just
cool,
random,
man.
and she's like, "Wow, I couldn't believe it," and that's how it got started.
Oh wow! I
then,
didn't even know that.
And they told him last Tuesday, "Hey, it's on. We'll give you the big room." Wednesday came back and said they had pulled it. So who knows if it was someone applying pressure or whatever. But I'm glad that it happened because it was a good event,
Yeah.
and it was really more focused on the kids and just good message of let's be
Yeah.
a community again and help each other.
Yeah,
out.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
then I get a text from Eric, and he's like, I just met this guy Jared Hudson, and he's got a company. It's very similar to Tim Ballard's with the Sound of Freedom. I haven't seen Sound of Freedom yet, but
I haven't either for what it's worth.
but Tim Ballard and I actually are of the same faith, and so but at some point before I moved here, I was listening to some of his books, I think, and I was aware of what he did and some cool stuff, and obviously that movie just came out, and so I kind of figured, well, maybe that's how your company's getting involved now, because now it's really in the news. It's really front and center. There's all this controversy because the media doesn't really, or Hollywood's not really trying to get behind this movie, but it has made $150 million so far, so it's doing
killing
okay.
it.
But the other thing that's interesting, we were going back talking at the beginning of the program about lies and stuff, and like, is QAnon behind this? And it's like QAnon didn't even exist. Like, as you said, that movie's been on ice for 5 or 6 years, waiting to get released.
Yeah.
So it's just all these, and I'm like, but what? Let's just start with this. Why is there a conspiracy towards things that are actually happening? And I think I
That's
love
a good question.
RFK Jr. Right comes on.
Yeah.
I really like this guy.
Me too.
He's getting on Rogan, and he's like, the border is not the border that you used to think it was, where it was just drugs coming in. These are now other countries in the world helping people to get across the border, right? Hey, pay us.
Yeah.
So the drug cartels are now in human trafficking, right? And it's like, wow. And I know, for one, that really opened my eyes to like, yeah, maybe my thinking has been antiquated on the border and how it's not just about the drugs, right? And if you live in Albania or something, and someone says, hey, the cartel will help you, you pay them $30,000. They're gonna fly you into Mexico City. They're gonna give you whatever documentation is needed. They're gonna take you up to the border, and they're gonna get you through. And they may also beat you and take everything that you own in the process, right? These are not nice people. And so, yet that's happening, right? And human trafficking and sex trafficking is happening. And just last night, as we start talking about Covenant Resource Group, right, you were part of some arrests where you're taking down people. Yet somehow,
it doesn't happen.
Why is this a conspiracy? Like, this is actually happening.
Yeah,
and
no,
there are
it
groups of
definitely
people like Tim Ballard and Jared Hudson that are on the front lines of this. How does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, again, it's the media will say what they want to say that pushes a narrative. I'm looking at here, but I can't find it. Anyway, Tim, I was talking to Tim last week, so I know Tim. I worked with him with OUR for a while, and while we stood up Covenant Rescue Group, it was to focus on stateside operations is really what it turned into, because for him with Nazarene Fund and Operation Underground Railroad, they primarily focused on overseas operations. I worked in Haiti with him a good bit, and it looks different overseas than it does here, but the problem is still the same. It's people being victimized and sold for that are at risk. So what I tell guys in Alabama, and guys hate to hear this, I got buddies that are builders where they get pissed when I hear this. I say, you are one of the largest human trafficking organizations on the face of the planet, because all of them will hire an illegal immigrant because they can hire them less than they would hire an American citizen for, and they put them to work out there, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Hispanics come in here, they work cheaper. They work great, right? But they work cheaper than what it would take to hire a normal, like citizen of America. It doesn't matter where they're from. Doesn't matter if they're black, white, Hispanic. And the politicians and the media will push the demographic piece. It's not the demographic that matters. It's that this person, they don't have anything to stand on. They can't complain if you don't pay them enough. You know why? Because they're here illegally. Who are they going to complain to? And you, like a dadgum roach, you like a zombie on a dead body, feed on their lack of ability to stand for themselves. So first off, contractors all across the state of Alabama, and they get pissed. You'll have guys on here pissed off that I'm saying it. But if you hire illegal immigrants, you are preying upon the weak, because you can pay them less, you can treat them like crap to go out and build and do more for you. That's the first form of trafficking. The largest form in the world is labor trafficking. That bleeds across the border. Sex trafficking also comes across the border. But here's the other problem. We're getting these illegal immigrants across, the borders open, all that. What we've seen on what we do is we have more illegal immigrants showing up to have sex with 14-year-old kids on our child exploitation stings that primarily deal with sex. They will show up to who they believe is a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old, whatever it is, whatever state statute you're trying to meet. They'll show up to have sex. We are seeing more illegal immigrants show up. A guy got deported a couple weeks ago back to Guatemala, where he came from, that are burning across the border, and they've been across the border 2 or 3 or 4 times, and they're paying money to mules every time. And so not talking too much about that, but we see a lot of illegal immigrants coming across and targeting kids, American citizens. And then the last thing, we arrested a guy that got deported this couple weeks ago. He got deported, he was put on an ICE hold and got deported. And a lady anonymously reached out to our organization, right? We always partner with a local agency and then with a federal agency to make sure that we, go through the process correctly. We're more like combat advisors would be a military term for what we do. And so they reached out to our organization, though, and said, hey, we saw this arrest. I'm not going to give you my name or talk to you. It was just like an unknown number. It was a text, I think. And she said, but she sent a picture of the guy. She said, y'all arrested this guy. She said, he's a bad man. Thank you. Well, she was an illegal immigrant herself, so she didn't have she was being preyed upon. According to her in her text message, she said, he kept me locked in a closet in a trailer for a week, made me take pictures, made me perform sex acts with him, made me perform sex acts with other people. So we assumed that buddies were paying him to go in and do things with him. And she was tied up and locked in a closet for a week. This is in the Birmingham metro area of Alabama, right? And no law enforcement knows about those. You know why they don't? Because who's she going to call? Yeah, she's an illegal immigrant. So if she calls, then she has nobody to turn to. So that would be the sex trafficking side that we're seeing tick up more and more and more. So these child exploitation stings help catch these guys that are doing that. And this dude, he's I won't talk specifically about it, but he was here working. I think he was working for a contractor doing, laying brick, if I remember right. But whatever it was, he's here. He's part of society. He's an illegal immigrant, yeah, but he's part of this open border problem, number one. But it's more than an open border problem, because we talking about Trump earlier. Every Trump supporting Republican, yeah, shut the border down. Yeah, well, you all want to shut the border down, but you're going to pay a guy less that came across the border because you're preying on him or his family, because they have no recourse. They have no recourse, and you're using that to grow your business. So is that right or wrong? I don't know. Maybe we'll let God be the judge on that. I believe it's wrong, but so no, it's not a conspiracy, and that's actually what's really happening. But it's also not this massive underground, like John Wick, the underground, assassins. Everybody's like, oh, the tunnels in D.C. have all these kids in it. That's where you get the QAnon stuff, right? Yeah. And the problem with QAnon is there's little bits of truth with it mixed with a bunch of other crazy stuff that people spin up. And I personally believe, a buddy of mine that on the agency side said that that the QAnon stuff was almost a honey trap for really far right wingers, right? The same. Well, it was a trap to bring these in. That's what I was told from a buddy in the system. Now, whether it is or not, who knows? Whether we might get smoked by black helicopters when we walk out of your house here. But that whole thing, I don't even know why it's tied to the child trafficking piece or the trafficking of people, whether it's for labor, whether it's for sex, whether it's for organ harvesting, because that goes on around the world. I know, because I've been in other countries where I've seen it, and then I work it here. I mean, we arrested 3 people last night showing up to have sex with 14-year-old girls. People will exploit children. People will exploit other adults for their gain, whether it's a contractor building a house in the state of Alabama or whether it's somebody buying a child for sex. So I don't know.
Let's talk about last night and just tie together some of the facts that I think I do know. And again, shout out to your friend. Is it Eddie Gallagher?
Yeah, Eddie. Yeah,
Eddie Gallagher's podcast, and then the other guy that runs the Outdoorsman podcast. Where
Josh Parvin.
Josh,
mm-hmm.
I thank them for some of the research I was able to do just to listen to you talk about Covenant Rescue Group. But my understanding is, somewhere around the $40,000 range is what you need funds wise to do a operation.
Yeah, so I'll
And some of that, if you could talk through that, and maybe in the context of last night, okay.
So to pull off an operation, it's about $50,000 per op. That's average nationally.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if we do it in Birmingham, Huntsville, out in Indiana, in Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, wherever it is we go. It doesn't matter where it's at. The average is $50,000 per op. So a lot of people like to know, okay, so in order to, do 2 nights of stings and some training for the law enforcement agency, what does it cost? About $50,000. So that's one way to look at it. The burn rate of the organization. So this is what it costs for the organization to run and do 1 op and 1 training a month. Is $74,000. It's like $74,240 or something
per month.
Per month, yeah, per month is what it cost us to run an operation, right? So now that's us running an operation with an agency once a month and running a training. Now, in order to tick it up, somebody asked me, so what do you need to do to tick it up to 2 operations per month with those subsequent trainings? And it doesn't. It's not another $74,000, right? Because you still have a lot of the organization in place. So we figured up it's like another $28,000, I think exactly per month. So basically, with a little over $100,000 per month burn rate, you can run 2 operations and 2 trainings for law enforcement agencies impacting child exploitation as it's related to sex trafficking of kids. And what that gives you is when you arrest these guys, you find the illegal immigrants that are doing stuff like this. You find guys that are doing stuff like this with illegal immigrants. You find guys we had a guy who was having sex with his own 18-month-old daughter, had it on his phone. Wife didn't even know about it, but he's yeah, I know, you're right. You got a daughter. You're look at his face.
My daughter's about 18 months.
Yeah, so I've got my youngest is 18 months, but he's having sex with his own 18-month-old daughter, his own flesh and blood, and he's taking pictures of it and videos. He's producing child porn, and then he's distributing that child porn. So I say all that to say
that's evil.
That is how you catch these guys on those type of stings. It's not, you don't have to go through this weird, all the hashtags on Instagram and do all this. That stuff you can do, but that takes a long amount of time, and these jokers are still out impacting kids every day, even if it's their own kids. How do we catch them? These child exploitation stings are how we catch them, and then from there you can rescue victims. So that's kind of the system. That's kind of what we go around and do. So per operation, about $50,000 for one of those. But a better way to look at it is the burn rate of the organization, which is to do 1 op and a training for an agency per month is about $74,000, and then in order to get to 2 operations and 2 trainings per month, you're going up to somewhere around $105,000 just to make it happen per month. So,
and then part of that, which I think is really important to point out, is you want to work this the right way, meaning that ultimately it leads to an arrest. It's not helpful at all, and I've heard you talk about this, where these vigilante groups or people, let's say I draw someone in on my own.
Yep.
I have the capability to go through the dark web or the deep web and just get on my computer and determine that there's a predator out there, and go to their house and kind of scream at them, right? I caught you. Aha. But I don't have anything behind me. Right? I don't have the ability to arrest, and so therefore now you're just embroiling them. You've attempted to embarrass them. You might put that little clip out on the internet, but what does that do? It probably just makes them dig deeper.
It does. It hides them better. So I was just looking up on here to see if I can, and I couldn't find the name of the organization, but there was an organization who was a local. And you think of like Chris Hansen to Catch a Predator, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's the same concept. Now, this organization was local to an area we were working in Indiana about a year ago. I was trying to look up their name right there on Facebook. I sent Josh a text, see if he could send it to me, but we might not get it. It's irrelevant. It don't matter. But that's what they were doing. And they were doing that like 3 weeks ahead of time, and they were doing it all the way up to this operation we had planned for the sheriff's office and this prosecutor's office in Indiana. We get there, and man, all of those dudes that when we wound up rolling, we wound up arresting quite a few guys, but all those dudes we arrested, they were all sketched out. Not that we were the police, but that we were those guys. You're just these clowns that are going to show me on Facebook Live or whatever, right? And so it negatively impacted a legitimate operation. This is what I'll leave people with. If you obtain all of this information through whatever means, right? You get all this information on this guy who's a sex predator who's going to exploit children. And you go and you say, I've got all this stuff, and you give it to a law enforcement agency, or you give it to a prosecutor, say, I got all this stuff, now go get this guy. Well, they can't do it. There's something in, what we call fruits of the poisonous tree. If I obtain stuff on a crime, but it's obtained through criminal activity, if it's obtained illegally, I can't use it. So you've done nothing. Everybody's like, I've done all this, and I've given this to you on a silver plate. No, you haven't. You've done nothing. You have done zero. You've actually made it harder to properly do this. So when we go and work with these agencies, we make sure that we, one, make a proper arrest. That's generally the easy part to do. The second thing is we make sure that the case is built so we can have a prosecutable case. Because the way it works is, use prostitution stings, which law enforcement have done forever. Prostitution is a misdemeanor charge, right? So with prostitution being a misdemeanor charge, that's their probable cause. So they're going to hook a prostitute to get drugs, guns, the guy selling the girl, felon with the gun, all whatever. They are not building a case on the front end. They are bringing in a criminal act on the front end to build the case on the back end of whatever they get. So it's kind of a buckshot approach. We don't know what we're going to get, just kind of fishing in random waters. For what we do, we build the case on the front end. So when the person shows up, we'll use the state of Alabama example because we're working here the last 2 nights. When they show up, we've already got 2 to 4 felony charges from the state of Alabama on this individual just based off of the messages that were sent back and forth on the phone. So they're already in the coffin when they show up. They're laid in the coffin, and everything we did prior to that is just another nail in the coffin. And as we tack them nails down in the coffin, we solidify that case even more. So for a prosecutor, and a lot of times you get a confession, right? You get a confession. But either way, even if you don't, you've got such an airtight case that the prosecutor is able just to move forward with it, and it sticks. And the end goal is whether they get 1 year, or I think somebody just got sentenced federally that we hooked last year. They got 120 months on the federal side, right? And then they had another 70 months on top of that because they had a gun with it. So there's still charges. They might have drugs. They might have to be a felon with a gun. Well, you get all that on the back end. That's easy. We don't know what we're going to get there. We know when we call this guy in, we know he's shown up to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. We know these are the charges we're going to get, and we know that they're airtight. So you build your case on the front end, and it doesn't take but, I've done it in less than 10 messages. It takes literally an hour or less, and now this guy shows up or this lady shows up. You hook them on a solid case, and then if you obtain a warrant or get consent, you can pull all the stuff off their phone, and that's where you find your child porn. Now you can start digging deeper into the system because we're trying to kill the beast here. The only way you kill it is to get in the belly of the beast. How do you get in the belly of the beast? You get somebody who's in there, who's living it every day, and you start exploiting their lives, because now you have the ability to do it because you can get a probable cause warrant to get in that phone. You have probable cause to believe that this person's distributing child porn. Why? Well, because they just showed up to have sex with a 14-year-old, and then they told me, hey, I've got a picture of this kid on my phone. I mean, does that make sense? So that's how you build a case, and that's how you do something.
How different are it's state by state, obviously, right? There's state laws. Yeah. It sounds like you're already working in Indiana, Alabama, other places. Are they wildly different from state to state?
No, not wildly different. I'll try. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't have to pull it up. But most child exploitation laws are the same. So in the state of Alabama, you've got 13A, 6, 111, 122, 124, 152, 154, I think, are the 5 charges we're looking at. That's anywhere from transmit obscene images, traveling to meet a minor for sex, solicitation of a minor for sex, and then your 152 and 154, I believe it is. That's your human trafficking 1 and 2. Might be 152 and 153. Either way, that's your human trafficking 1 and 2. That's the only part that's different in the state of Alabama. and we're still having trouble getting those human trafficking charges, even though we're meeting the statutes. It's just not a lot of precedent for it. So a district attorney's office, they don't have any precedent to go off of to see, can I push this charge or can I not? And then judges a lot of times go back and forth. Well, is this what this means in the law, or is this what this means in the law? So you get a lot of, there's not any case precedent. So have y'all heard case law, right? Case law that's not real. It's case precedent, right? The only people that make law are elected, legislators, right? Whether it's in Montgomery or representatives, or whether it's, or Congress up in, D.C. It's case precedent. That's what you're looking for, and they have no precedent for our human trafficking 1 and 2. So it's not anybody's fault. It's just the way it is, and because it came into being in 2018. So we're one of the only states that I've worked in that has that. And then on the federal side, you have very similar laws. On the federal side, there's just certain ways they have to meet. So the feds prefer to adopt a good state case that can match a federal, maybe federal nexus, I guess might be the word. That's generally where you see the federal side coming into this. They just adopt a state case. That's a good state case. We want to take it. Yeah. And then they'll move forward with it.
So I guess I would imagine what's difficult for you to come onto any program and talk is, number one, you don't want to give away too much of your trade craft and how you go about doing stuff. Should there be some creep listening, watching, right?
Oh, there probably is. Statistically, there would be.
Piecing it together.
100%, yeah. Oh. Yeah, statistically, there would be.
So I know you've talked about using burner phones, of course, and I don't want you to dive into anything, and nor would you share anything you shouldn't share, right? As far as what makes your operation successful. But is that something you feel like from op to op, are you having to employ different tactics and methods because people are onto you?
We do, yeah.
Because I know and I know you said these guys are smart.
A lot of them are smart.
You have to be really, really smart to evade prison. And evade, right? Like having these things happen to you. So they're thinking through this.
It's like that old, I won't even say that old buck, because we know what make bucks dumb. Y'all hunt in here? Anybody hunt?
I'm actually going hunting next week.
Oh, yeah?
In Ocala, Florida.
All right.
We're going to go hunting hogs.
That's close to my family.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that'll be a fun time. So you got this old doe that ain't nobody ever shot. She's old as dirt, but you can't sit in the woods without her. She's looking in trees all the time. She's smart. She's seen stuff get shot in front of her. She's probably been shot at. Maybe she's been shot. She's been burned enough. She's seen the world, and she knows, and she's old, and she's looking around. That's what we see. It's kind of the same thing you see with these guys that are exploiting children, especially on the sexual exploitation side. They're smart. They hide it well. They know, because law enforcement do sting so many times, and they burn themselves. And heck, I mean, we've burned ourselves before too. But it's just, once they get burned, or they see a buddy get burned, we'll have guys casing us out for 2 or 3 hours in the parking lot. And so that's why we have to be careful where we do takedowns at. If we're on a static, or if we're on a mobile, we might have multiples in there, and they see us take down a guy in a parking lot, right? And they've already been casing us out. So you have to be careful with how you go about bringing in this buck to your bait pile, for lack of a better word, because some of them dumb as rock. Some of them just show up and don't think about it. But yeah, a lot of them very smart. So yes, we have to change stuff up a good bit, because they've been burned by law enforcement before. Some of them have been caught before. A lot of these guys are repeat offenders. I had a guy last night that was he'd actually been charged. He had sexually abused. He was charged with 13A6 TAC 66 in Alabama, which is sexual abuse of a minor. I think it said he had something along that lines. It was sexual abuse of a minor. I think it was a 14-year-old girl he had sexually abused. So he had actually already physically done it, and now he's showing up for another 14-year-old girl. So that's the other thing. You get these repeat offenders.
Can you walk me through, like, if you don't mind, yesterday? You said earlier before we hit record, you showed up at 6 a.m. to kind of set up, and it was all the way through about 11 p.m. Right, by the time you probably got home. Like,
well, we left at 6. So normally, let's use something that's not running right now. We'll use just a general op template, and I'll try to curb it as much as possible. When you work with a law enforcement agency, us acting as consultants, we go in. Most of the time, the agency calls us, says, "Hey, we want you to set this up for us." So if a sheriff's office calls, we'll go in and we'll set up this sort of sting. We'll give them training on the front end. This is how you set this up. These are the things you need in place, which ain't that much. These are the things you need in place. Here's the tools you have to have. We have all the equipment and tools they have to have. And then we show them how to put the pieces in the proper place, right? Because a lot of times agencies have the knowledge of how to do it, but they get the order of operations wrong. You know, PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. The order of operations. I might get any portion of the problem correct, but if the order of operations wrong, is my answer at the end going to be correct? No. So it's the same thing. They might get the certain portions of the problem correct, but they oftentimes get the order of operations wrong. And it's not a hit on law enforcement. It's because they haven't historically done this. They've got the tools, and a lot of times they have the knowledge. They just don't have the knowledge of how to put these things in place to be able to make it happen like that in one evening. So that's kind of what we give them and we lay out for them. And then we have it already set up through our stuff where we run a sting with them. It's on the job training for them. And so we run a child exploitation sting static, or sometimes we'll do mobile, or sometimes we'll do both. And it's normally about a 60-day minimum lead time to get it set up with an agency. Sometimes we'll do it quicker. Normally about a 60-day lead time to get everything in place, and then you run that operation. And we're booked out with agencies all over the nation until June of next year.
Really?
Yeah, that's just one a month now. So, and when we run one, we normally run 2 or 3 nights of those stings. Most of the time we do two nights, but normally we do 2 or 3 nights of those stings, and so that's a full day of training, a half day of training, an operation, a half day of training, an operation. And that gives them everything they need. So then when we leave, go forth and do great work. Make this work for you in your area, because it's different in, New Mexico than it is in Florida.
And how do you, go ahead. How do you identify these individuals? For example, and again, give as much information as you can, but for the 18-month-old, and if you can't use them exactly, but how do you find someone like that? Because it's.
So they reach out to us. We have it set up to where they reach out to us. I won't go too much into what it is,
Gotcha.
but they reach out to us looking for this, and we make sure, and they know early on in the process, age, when location is necessary to put out location. I mean, they know and most of the time these guys, man, they'll go down the list. Y'all are the police, man. This is you're too young. You're Joe. I mean, they are back and forth on, like, they know what they're doing, was what I'm getting at. It's not like this is like a misunderstanding. They know exactly what they're doing. So with that being said, they reach out to us. And so then once we get them, once they travel, once we hook them, you've got to have probable cause to. Sorry, I'm bumping your TV.
No, you're fine.
Here.
You're good.
They got to have probable cause to investigate any sort of criminal act, right? They've got to have. I can't just say, hey, I think that this guy's doing this, and all of a sudden show up at his house and kick his door, right? That's
Right.
What's good about our country is we have a constitution that protects that, right? And protects our correspondence as well, right? You got Fourth Amendment protections over all your whatever your data or the messages you send and all that. So we have a country that protects that. You're innocent until proven guilty. That's a really good thing. So a lot of times people say, the red tape. Well, that's actually our Constitution that protects us. So the same people complaining about the red tape, they're actually complaining about the Constitution of the U.S., which makes you innocent until proven guilty, because anybody can say anything.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we've all known, we don't just because our government says it doesn't mean it's true. Who in here trusts the government? Right? We've all worked for the government. And we all still work with the government. But no, I don't trust what they say. So that's part of it. We've got to build that case that then gets me into legally, constitutionally, into these aspects of their life, because hey, this guy was sending nudes to somebody he thought was 14 years old. This guy showed up to have sex with a 14-year-old. This guy was going to pay $150 to do this. I now have reasonable suspicion that he has more stuff on his phone, right? And so maybe I'll interview him. Maybe he'll admit to it, or maybe we're going through the process that takes for law enforcement. Well, now that he said, yeah, no, this ain't the first time, but I don't normally do this. All right, so now I've got probable cause that there's other girls in his phone, because he just told me it wasn't his first time. Now I've got probable cause that there's other stuff in his phone, so I can get obtain a warrant, or maybe he'll give me consent to his phone. A lot of times they'll give you consent. I mean, one of our interviewers had a guy write an apology letter. You know,
It's
in the interview, you know, you go through the interview process, you Mirandize them, read them, do their rights on there, sitting at a table with them, and the guy wrote an apology letter. Well, he just wrote a letter of that
he
admitted it all, right? So that's the other side of this thing, is that you're catching a guy and then you're digging into him, and then a lot of times, to be honest with you, you'll find somebody who legitimately, probably the ones I feel it's the hardest to deal with is, for a lot of guys coming across the border, a lot of illegal immigrants, let's say like 15 is the age of consent, I guess, in Mexico, apparently. That's what we're told. But so like they legitimately don't, I mean, they're just come across the border, they're going to buy a prostitute. And so what we've started doing, that's why we're not using 15 as much anymore. We'll use a younger age, because it removes that
doubt.
That way it removes that doubt, because I do believe in justice and mercy. This guy needs to understand what he's doing is wrong if she's 15. Heck, even if she's 16 years old, if he's 30. However, there's justice and mercy to try to change that trajectory. Hey, look, if you're going to be here in this country, if they're illegal, they get deported. If he's legal, you're going to be in this country, you need to learn and understand the laws that we have in place. And so we'll set it one step even removed from that a lot of times. So that's about as deep as we go into it.
So for you're booked out, it sounds like till next June, right?
For operations,
at least are they reaching out to you? Is it surely just, okay, we have this problem, they don't have enough resources to do it? Or is it also because you're SEAL trained and then you train people to a different level of like lethality? So it's like, hey, we need some real ass kickers to come in here and help us, because that's not a part of the training that they get? No,
not necessarily. I mean, we'll do the tactical training for them if they request. The nonprofit covers that. We'll do tactical training for them if they request it for active shooter and all that stuff. But this isn't even stuff that I did in the SEAL team. This is what we learned after, especially with the cyber world kicking off the way it did, and what we've learned being a law enforcement officer, right? So I'm still a state agent, and then I'm a TFO with Homeland Security. So on the federal side, what we've learned on that end. And I would say that more often than not, the feds and larger agencies do try and attempt to do this, and they get more into the longer term stuff, but they don't have the bandwidth. And so what helps is to be able to go into a smaller agency, an agency of maybe like 10 or 20 people. This is where we really like to work. That's within maybe a large county that doesn't, maybe it's the county doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with this, but they have a small agency that could go in and partner with them, teach them how to do it, to show them, hey, look, you ain't got to this. You don't have to have all of these assets and all this stuff. You can do this with 3 or 4 folks. When they see that, they're like, oh, we can do this. We can do this. Because again, they have all the knowledge and parts. It's just making sure we put the pieces in the right order, so we have a solid arrest, a prosecutable case, and we make sure we put the bad guy in jail and get them on they're a sex offender now. So now this individual, let's say none of the stuff on the phone pans out. Let's say they don't have any stuff on the phone. At a minimum, before that happened, now we get this individual where he can't be a nursery, a nursery teacher at church, or he can't be a coach at a school, or he can't have like a janitor. He can't be a janitor in a school or something like that, or the same thing with a female. That's one end of it. So we start nipping it in the bud at the front end before we have to go through a litany of stuff and see all these people that are negatively impacted, all these kids that are negatively impacted because this person is a teacher who's in a position of trust. Does that make sense? And that's kind of what we're trying to do. Because most of the time, these folks that are targeting kids, they will seek employment. They will seek something that gets them near children.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, and they call that a person of trust. So, I mean, we rolled a doctor recently.
Did you? Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be a person of trust. So,
what about the new term? Sorry.
No, you're fine.
MAPS. I mean, how does that make you feel? The minor attracted person.
Man, I mean, how does it make anybody feel that's a dad? And we're trying to set. Now we're saying, so it went from the homosexual. Hey, we just want to be married, to now it's like the LGBTQ. You got all of these things that are added to it. And it's just continuing on down the list with people that are tying themselves to that. And now you're seeing minor attracted people. So they're trying to make it a sexual orientation. which is one antithesis to what I believe is a Christian, right? But that being said, that's what they're trying to do. So it makes them feel better because pedophile's a bad word. Well, that's like me. That's like you saying, "Hey, I don't want you to call us murderers," right? I don't want you to call us murderers. Well, what are you? What are you? It says, "I don't want you to call me a pedophile. I'm not exploiting children. I'm just a minor attracted person." No, that's a problem because if you're attracted to my little girls and you come to my house,
Yeah.
you're going to die. I don't care if I spend the rest of my life in jail. I don't care if I swing from a rope. You're not going to come after my kids. And I think every dad feels that way. So more so than even what I do, it's more of just being a dad. The most notorious pedophile of all time, and I can't remember his name. I forget it everywhere I go. I said it last night talking to a group of folks, but I think Reynolds was his last name. Either way, this is what he said when they asked him, "Hey, why do you target specific people? You know, is it what age? It's always kids, right? So we know this age wasn't, this is always young people is where that was. It demographic because he's black, white, Hispanic, didn't matter. Was it boy, was it girl, didn't matter. He went after all of them, didn't have anything. So what was it that made you target a kid? Because all this is kind of hodgepodge to look at it from the outside looking in. His is what he said. I'll try to find the interview and send it to y'all. He said, "I looked at the dad. I looked at the father, and if the father appeared to be a threat, I didn't go after that kid." That's condemning to us as dads.
Yeah.
So what I ask dads is, one, are you a threat or are you perceived as a threat? I'm going to make a shirt that says be a threat. Right? Be a threat to whoever would take your kids from you. That's something that we as dads have to lean on, especially as men of the house, right?
But isn't that your duty?
That's your
kind of
duty,
part
yeah.
of it? Yeah.
I'm supposed to die for these kids. Christ says, "Love your wife like Christ loved," or the Bible says, "Love your wife like Christ loved the church." What does it mean? He gave up everything he was gonna be, everything he was, and everything he was gonna be for the church. He went to the cross, right? That's what he says in Unforgiven. It's a hell of a thing to kill a man, and he says you take everything he was and everything he's ever gonna be. Well, that's what it means to love your wife, love your family, love your kids like Christ loved the church, is to be willing to give up everything I am and everything I'm gonna be to protect these people that God gave me. And it's important for us to see, you want to impact human trafficking on the front end? Be a threat to anybody who would target your kids. And then I've had moms ask me, "So I'm a single mom, what do I do?" Well, you're going to have to be a double threat. You've got to be double the threat. You got to be.
We're in America, so get a gun or some pepper spray.
Well, and it's not even a physical threat. It's funny you say that, but yeah, that's one thing, the physical threat. But it's not guys showing up in a van that says free candy that's going to snatch your kid. That's possibly there, but it's this right here.
Yeah,
they steal your kids' minds and their eyes and their ears with this phone. So I encourage people at a minimum to be involved in your child's life enough to know what's going on this phone if you're going to give it to them. I encourage you not to even give them one until they absolutely have to have one. If they're driving or something, obviously, we live in a world nowadays where this is important to have when they're driving. But realize you have just opened your kid up to the world and the world up to your kid when you give them this phone.
And
you know that better than anybody.
How has that
with
changed what you do? I mean, because I did see Sound of Freedom, and he did talk about that on there, Tim. Afterwards, he kind of really goes in. There's that interview with Jim Caviezel and him as well. And then I saw him on Timcast as well the other day.
Okay, yeah.
And he just said that it changed drastically once the phones were available. He said it just changed overnight. It's just a completely different operation. Is that true?
Yes, it is. I mean, but see, when you see, that's here stateside for sure, but when you see people overseas, you see kids being stolen from their families being killed, all that stuff. That's where you don't see that stateside because we have a pretty good system in place to keep that from happening. So this right here, though, is not regulated as much, and I don't even want the government to regulate any of this. I mean, I'm very. It's hard for me to say, yeah, we need more government regulation because the government does such a terrible job with their regulation anyway, right? They overstep their bounds. On the other end, this is so open. So who is the best people to regulate your family? You're not going to change the world. Change your world.
Your parents.
Change your world. Your parents. That's right. God gave you your kids for a reason. Be about your family and your children. Be threatening about your family and your children. We got the physical, especially in Alabama, we got the physical thing down. If somebody breaks into your house, are you going to have any problem smoking them?
No.
You get a chance. I mean, y'all are going to take care of your family, right? Yeah, absolutely. you've just let somebody into your house with this. And it's not even that they're targeting even for sex trafficking or sex exploitation. One of the things I seen a lady last night that we were talking to, because like I said, we're running operations and I had to go screen the op for a certain group of folks. And one of the ladies, she said, no, you're exactly right. I think she had a nephew or something that thought he was messaging back and forth with he was 13 and he had a 14 or 15-year-old girlfriend he was messaging back and forth with. She's sending nudes, so that's a child porn issue on the one end of it. They're like boyfriend, girlfriend. She's sending nudes, and he's paying for them with his mom's, putting money in his Venmo with his mom's card, and he's paying her and sent out thousands of dollars to this. And it was some guy from Indonesia, right?
Oh, wow.
And that's what they do. So it's kind of catfishing would be isn't that the term, you know? So they'll catfish your kids. They'll get into your life. They'll get into every aspect of your family's life. And they'll make your kids believe something where your kids will leave the house. Hey, you want to physically snatch your kid? I don't have to pull up in a free candy van and say, hey, you want to come over here? They'll talk your kid out of that house with that cell phone. Gaming systems are something we've seen in the gaming rooms, the headsets they wear. A lot of talk going on in theirs, and we see a lot of sexual exploitation of young boys from the homosexual community out of those gaming rooms. So,
because gaming rooms, it's kind of fun. I actually saw that on some show the other day. There was a terrorist, and they were communicating through gaming. And, I did think about that. I was like, you know what? That's probably one of the few areas nowadays that no one really watches or monitors.
No one monitors.
Yeah.
It, right. And again, it's not that we want people to monitor everything in our lives, but who is the best person to monitor their own home? The person that owns the home. Mother and father need to be monitoring and watching their kids and what their kids are doing, and that will start to curb at least the impact that it has on us personally. And once we get our own house in order, hear Jordan Peterson talk about this all the time. Once I get my own house in order, then what can I do? Well, then I can go look to impact other people's houses, help them through that process. So that's kind of my heart, and that's what I present when we go around and build awareness. You are number one. If you're a mom or a dad, if you're a husband and wife pair, obviously we got a lot of single parent homes nowadays. But if you're a husband and wife pair, or if you're a single parent home, you have to impact your kids, because when we get involved on our end with law enforcement, the problem's already happened. Yeah. They've already gotten your kid, and it's already negatively impacted. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not restoration in that. Plenty of aftercare stuff and all that. So that they can go through. But we would rather it not happen, right?
So you're saying a strong community. So would you say the lack of community? So, I would say when I was growing up, not even too long ago here in Huntsville, I knew everyone on my street. I knew all the kids. I knew the older people. My dad came from, I'm 100% Cuban. My family escaped from Cuba. So we really were raised in that you go to church on Sundays, you have a sense of community. If I was going to walk to my uncle's place down on Hickory Hill to, Sherwood, whatever, he knew I was coming, but everyone knew who I was. Nowadays, even for me, so it's hard to cast dispersion on everyone, but it seems like the sense of community and the sense of belonging, people don't go to churches as much anymore. People don't do things together anymore. Right. Everything's at your house or streaming or the internet. Would you say the lack of community is making it easier for people to do things like this?
Yeah, possibly, but I wouldn't even go that far. That's the next step. I would say, what is the community in your home? How often do you sit down with your kids? Yeah. How often is
dinner like this where we're just
exactly
phone,
you're
right?
sitting here scrolling your Instagram and your kids over there doing theirs, or your kid's being irritating towards you, so what do? You give them a phone and they go watch YouTube. You have no idea what they're doing or what they're watching. That is generally kind of what I'm talking about. But yes, I would argue the lack of community hinders opens us up to that threat of human trafficking within our community or child exploitation within our community. However, just us and our family, the lack of community within the family. You just mentioned it. What do you say? We're at dinner time and we're all on our phone.
And you know what? I do that too. So it's easy to make it a big thing, but you're right. It's even something as small as, here, Chloe, take this
phone because you're irritating me, is basically what you're saying to the kid. Now this is their parent. And whatever this tells them is what they go with, which again, it's my mama used to sing a song with little kids. Oh, be careful Little feet where you go. Be careful, little hands, what you do. Be careful, little mind, what you think. Eyes, what you see. Ears, what you hear. Mouth, what you say. For the Father up above is looking down with love. Oh, be careful, little whatever it is, what you do. And so and that song is so true. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Mind, what you think. They see with their eyes. They hear with their ears, and it then alters what they think with their mind based off this phone. Now, mommy and daddy don't know what they're talking about because why? Because we gave this to them to run their life. And that is not a good thing because it's then easy for a predator to use this. And a predator not even in your community, somebody from across the world, somebody from New Jersey. We did one recently. A guy was targeting a kid down here in the Birmingham area who's from New Jersey, Palestinian guy. So that being said, you've just given them the thing that the predators use to target them. And so that's why you just got to be vigilant about your kids and be a threat.
What's Tim Ballard like? You said you spent some time with him.
Oh yeah. He actually just texted me a little bit ago.
Oh really?
Yeah, he's a good dude, man. I mean, he's a nice guy. I'm trying to think. He's done his best he could to, with what he did. He was Homeland Security agent for a while, and then he got out. Now he was out, but I didn't know him when he was in HSI. Yeah. I knew him when he started OUR because I had other team guy buddies that worked for him, and he did as good as he could to get as many people out of austere locations that he knew of as he could. And then now he was telling me a couple weeks ago on the phone, it's become a whole lot more difficult for him now because it's so big. It's hard to be really operational, and we're going to run into the same thing with what we do, especially here stateside, to the point that it makes it more difficult. Even me running for sheriff, and then people see me out working on the street or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, this man's the high sheriff. I saw him on a sign." I'm like, "No, I'm not the high sheriff," but I mean, I'm recognized at least in our the Birmingham metro area a lot when I'm doing this work. So I can't imagine for a guy like Tim who has national and even international recognition for what he's done over the last 15 years in human trafficking. That's probably the thing that hurts him the most. And now he's more of he raises funds and he raises awareness to support organizations that are operational and also support lobbying for legislation that impacts human trafficking for us nationally.
Because I think playing back what you're saying is he's too well known amongst those criminals, unless you have a really good disguise team.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say I wouldn't even say well known amongst the criminals. It's just the well known, so it makes it. Even if you're not well known amongst the even if you're not well known amongst the criminals that are doing this stuff, when you're out there, you're out there. Yeah. Right? When you have a public persona, and so for him, I think that's what's been the most frustrating thing for him over the last few years. At least, just again, I talked with him 2 weeks ago. He called. He got my number from a buddy in Congress when he was up there doing some stuff, and so he called, just check in, see how things are going, talk about some stuff that he would like to work on. But I hadn't talked to him since probably 2018 or 2019, since that point, But but yeah, man, he's like any. I mean, he's like any of us, I mean, he's and again, the media goes after him. I will tell you this: there is an unnecessary. I don't know what the word. It doesn't matter how you feel about Tim Ballard for the people that do and don't like him. I got buddies that don't like him, but it doesn't matter how you feel about the guy. He is having an onslaught against him that's undue. It's not necessary, but they're going after him because of what he's exposed. I think it's very similar to what you see. Sorry, my mouth was from the microphone.
It's okay.
I think it's very similar to what you see was us talking about Trump, earlier on before the podcast started. It's very similar to what you see there. He's, whether you like him or not, it's irrelevant. He's receiving a lot of undue scrutiny because of what he's exposed within the system. And Tim is in the same boat with this human trafficking stuff. He's receiving undue scrutiny, which I don't envy him for, but I definitely respect him for because he's the one that's exposed it.
Well, man, I think we got to wrap up. I know you got a hard stop, and I can't believe how fast it goes by. I know.
Hopefully, this podcast was halfway decent for you. It's not a bunch of trash.
And I want to have you back on.
Yeah, man.
And for we can chat later, but I think I'm not saying like regular. I'm not signing you up to you're gonna regular, but
once a week.
Yeah.
But these are
here at 8 a.m.
There's a few areas longer I've been doing this where personally I've become very interested in certain things, and want, like, Crime Stoppers is one of them.
Yeah,
and how the city's done a really good job of, well, actually the cops, the sheriff's office gives a deputy to Crime Stoppers, which is great, just to help them with, with their work. And just there's just so many great things going on here with people with mental health, and trying to combat suicide, especially amongst our veterans, and a lot of good stories told on here. And I just love to have you back, because I think we barely got into all the things that we could get into when it comes to. We didn't even really get into who Jared Hudson was. I want to hear more about the SEALs.
Cares. Nobody cares, man.
But obviously, with the Sound of Freedom having you come out, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
to
no worries,
kind of
man.
talk to someone that's very close to this, that's that knows Tim, and that's doing stuff like on the ground, right? You're experiencing this, and so I really appreciate it, man. And thanks for all you do.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Do you have any final shout outs or anything you want to say?
Nah, man, I appreciate y'all having us. If y'all want to follow us or look into what we're doing, go to covenantrescue.org. You can donate. We need funds. A lot of our stuff's donor funded. We still are able to get grants and different things from different organizations in the government, but we still are heavy donor funded. So covenantrescue.org. Donate, follow us, buy some swag, whatever it is, and then if anybody wants to see what we do on my private business side, now this is my business, right? Not the organization, their own entity. You can go to theshootinginstitute.com and keep up to date with some of the stuff we've got going on there. So
very good.
And Troy, can I say one thing?
Yeah, of course, Eric.
I want to say one thing real quick about Troy before we sign off. He does give a lot of credit. I got something to say about you and Tim as well after, but. Troy, when I met him about a year and a half ago, kind of testament to what you've kind of done too, building your companies. But Troy, he doesn't like to lead it on, but he does have an actual job outside of this with Mantech. But Troy has just seeing him just dig and try to interview people and kind of go up and even see the studio. It's really cool, and just to have someone like you, the other day or other week we kind of text about Sound of Freedom, and just to have, and I know you're not part of that movie or anything like that, but just to see Troy personally with these guests. So, I appreciate you, Jared, coming on
thank y'all
and
for
supporting
having me.
my buddy, Troy, because he really is doing great stuff. So shameless plug. I'm sure he'd love to have Tim on here at some point too. But also Jared, thank you to you and Tim and everyone that does what you do, because regardless of if you guys become well known, I think maybe it's kind of like becoming a dad. It's your next role in life, your next duty.
Yeah.
What you guys have done, and Sound of Freedom did it on a big national level, but then talking to you and the people who do what you guys do, it's cool to see in a world that's so divisive, to see people who will put you could be putting yourself, harm's way for someone who maybe thinks completely different than you, or may consider what you do evil. And to me, I think that's what is the testament of a true good person, is because true evil in my mind is always gonna be there, and so evil is when good men do nothing. So it's good to see good men do something. So
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for having me, brother.
Hey, no problem.
Yeah, man.
Till next time.
Sounds good.
Thank you.